It's time to stop dealing and start demanding. It's time to stop being PC and start being transparent and authentic. It's time to get real. Prepare yourself. It's time for Crazy and the King.
Welcome to Crazy and the King.
So let's see. I don't know. I'm actually losing track, Jay. I don't know if it's week 5, week 4, week 3 and 2 days. Yeah, I mean, like literally, I'm seeing people counting. I know Rayanne Thorne out in California. She has been probably on forced stay at home. She actually decided, her and her husband decided to do it, I think 2 weeks before I even started to do it. So I'm actually starting to lose track. How are you?
I am good. Definitely getting stir crazy, but it also kind of feels like a little more normal now, if that makes sense. Like I'm getting into the flow of life again. So that's been nice this week. It's a little cold here, but other than that, I can't really complain.
Yeah, no, weather is going up and down. But what do you mean getting back into the flow of life? Like I don't have to do morning drop-offs for school or any of that. So are you like moving outside of the house more now?
Not other than to run, we're not, but it just feels like we're back in a better routine. People are being more responsive. They're a little bit more used to this, and the anxiety, I think, feels a little bit less, or at least for me it does. And so now it's really just kind of impatient to travel, to see the people, in our world and do all of those things. But I don't feel as anxious as I did before.
Yeah, well, honestly, it is an experience unlike any other that I've felt in my lifetime. And for me, movement has still been stalled. I don't want to say, a standstill, but it's pretty close. Like I literally have driven my truck out of the garage once in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And so I definitely know that we are on a slower pace. But the good side is that I'm spending more time reading. I'm actually strategizing on the business and have decided, Julie, to rebrand. So I'm hoping later this year. Yeah, I'm hoping later this year to release a rebranded version of the work that I'm doing with clients and organizations. So I'm excited about that. And I've also had several other glimmers. And, I'm sure the HR and TA community has had a number of them that they can talk about, from happy hour Zoom calls, which I think all of us have been on at least one of those. Mind you, Julie, I've been on at least 10. And not once have we had an incident. So it's always been good. But from the happy hour
That's
Zoom
saying
calls,
something for HR people.
Yeah, man. Yeah. They're risk averse. They try to keep it real buttoned up and tight. You understand? So, but I will tell you, one of the glimmers that was really amazing was, a week or so ago when Hung Lee did the 24-hour marathon, and it was actually a marathon that you were a part of. That was awesome.
That was fun. That was really fun. I couldn't believe how many people were there. I could not believe just the infrastructure that Hung got together so quickly, and what an amazing community that we have. Like lots of new faces and names, but a lot of the names that I love to see too. So that was definitely a pick me up yesterday.
Yeah, it was. It was a pretty good thing. So talk to us. What's going on today?
So a couple weeks ago when we were recording, you mentioned Netflix's Crip Camp on the pod and asked if I had watched it. And I kind of guiltily said no. And it wasn't really because I didn't want to watch it. It's been on the list, but I kind of, when I thought of it, I was like, it's going to piss me off. I'm going to cry. I'm going to be angry. They're going to muck it up in some way. And I just don't know if I'm in the headspace to do it. And so finally last night, my wonderful husband, who prods me out of my comfort zone, said, it doesn't matter if you're in the right headspace or not. This is about your community. We're going to watch it. And so we did. and I was completely wrong. I'm actually so happy that I watched it. I watched it again today. Like, that wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm smiling because, we use the pod to be honest with one another and with our listenership, whether they are regular subscribers or individuals that are just dropping in or, as they use that term, lurking, just to see what Julie and I are talking about. We use this platform to be honest and transparent. And so the reason why I asked is because I really wanted to just get one piece off of my chest.
Okay.
And then we could talk about all of it. But
Okay.
so for me, I didn't have hesitation going in. I didn't know what to expect. I just had no expectation whatsoever. I just knew that it was about a community that I wasn't necessarily a part of, but absolutely fond of. And maybe fond is not the right word, but supportive.
Fond is fine.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I got to tell you, man, the first 10, 15 minutes, I was actually uncomfortable watching it. And I think the reason why I was uncomfortable watching it is because during that, well, even after that first 15 minutes, during the first almost up to 40 minutes or so, I kept thinking about times that I had been the only African American or Black male in a classroom, and conversations came up around slavery, and all of the kids in the classroom would look at me. Or times that I had been inside of, convenience stores, maybe even department stores, and incidents may have happened, and everyone looked at me. Sitting amongst adults as an adult, and they talk about various things that are happening in the news, perhaps, specific communities of color, and everyone's looking at me. And so as I give those three examples, naturally I'm getting a bit older, from school to teenage years to adult years. And what I experienced, Julie, in the first 15 or 20 minutes of the movie was, I don't know how other people around the world that are watching this, how they're looking at them on that screen. We're not used to seeing this on our screen. You understand what I'm saying? I think the number is less than 3%. Actually, it's 2.7% of characters in entertainment, I believe, showed some degree of disability. Like never. It just doesn't happen. And so I was actually uncomfortable.
If they are even disabled, right?
Exactly.
The actors may not even be.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it was hard for me to watch it because I didn't know how other people were looking at that community. Were they laughing at them? Were they pointing at them? Were they questioning why they were on the film, on the screen? So anyway, I don't want to stay there too long, but I got to tell you, I was uncomfortable, and then I became very comfortable, even borderline angry towards the end of the movie. And then, of course, I ended with a smile.
Well, I do want to spend some time on that, but because I think that discomfort was a purposeful mechanism, and I think for a person of color, that discomfort is even more intentional. I think, and I think that's good. So I want to talk about that, but let's give everyone sort of the lay of the land on this documentary. You should absolutely watch it. It's on Netflix. If you don't have Netflix, I'll give you my password. It's that good. So we'll start by that. This was actually produced by Barack and Michelle Obama. They have a big agreement with Netflix right now. So we're seeing a lot of original programming coming from the Obamas. So first of all, that just made me very happy.
Yep.
And one thing that President Obama did well was include people with disabilities in his administration.
He did.
One thing that I wish he had done better was include us in the laundry list of groups of people that need to be included when he was making his speeches. It was an active part of his behavior, and I wish I'd been an active part of his campaigning in the same way that HRC included us. But this was probably one of the most kind of poignant pieces of film about people with disabilities, including people with disabilities that I've ever seen. And I don't know if you catch in the beginning, just before they start talking about the Crip Camp, they have some TV announcers talking about kind of people with disabilities and how they're the others and they're sort of creatures and these kind of things. And that language that was so common then is not that uncommon now, and our biases are not that different now. And so, this really just tells a story about how inclusion and representation can spark revolution. And it started at camp. Right.
Camp.
Like I went to church camp when I was little, and I definitely didn't start a revolution there.
Yeah, absolutely. And a camp that was just, a stone's throw away from, what's the name of that thing? Woodstock, just
Woodstock.
Just a stone's throw away from Woodstock. And it's probably important for the audience to know that, the film really pulled from about 40 years of old footage. I found that to be fascinating as well. Like whoever started the camp, forget their names back in the day when they started the camp, that they had the vision, the foresight, the instinct to bring out a video camera. I can only imagine how big that damn thing was, but having that camera out and pulling from that footage and grabbing those photos and then incorporating present day interviews, a real collage of history and events and personality. Like I smiled at the young man. I don't know if you remember him, Julie, somewhere towards the beginning, the young man who was blind. He actually ended up being blind because he got too much oxygen in his incubator as a baby. And so when the camera came on, it said his name and then it gave his real phone number. He gave his real phone number. He gave his real phone number. And then he said, I don't know who's going to see this. I don't know when you're going to see this, but if you see it, I want you to know that I'm blind. I had too much oxygen in the incubator and I want you to call me. And I just said, look at this, the freedom and the spirit and just look at that right there. He's not, wallowing in his inability to see. He is seeing that things can be beautiful. He's not judging anything. He has no list of preconditions. All he said is, call me. He didn't say what we were going to talk about. Just call me. Like I loved seeing the realness of the personalities and the people. And so, that's what toyed at me in the beginning. It was a matter of me moving through emotions like, damn, I don't know what these folks is doing, man, but they grabbing at the kid. They really are pushing me to think differently, to feel differently, to view differently, to be present differently. It was an incredible beginning.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that exact piece is what created this group of activists and revolutionaries really that drove the civil rights movement in the 60s and 70s and today for people with disabilities. So if we can then take about what we know about that period of time, there is a drastic differences in realities for people with disabilities, not just from people who are not disabled, but with each other. And so many people with disabilities at that time were still institutionalized.
Yep.
And they were institutionalized in absolutely barbaric. We would not put our dogs in the types of institutions that we kept humans in. during the 1950s, 60s, and part of the 70s till we really started to move to deinstitutionalization and home and community-based services. And when you're treated like an animal, what the result of that is. And so we saw some kids coming in to the camp from an institution in New York who couldn't feed themselves, who couldn't bathe, who had absolutely no ability to self-care.
Yeah.
Because no one had taught them to. If I didn't teach my children how to do things, they wouldn't know how to do them. And this is the drastic difference that we see versus some of the other kids who were raised in neighborhoods where polio had ran rampant, and a lot of the kids had disabilities, and being in a wheelchair was not a thing. And others who had parents who they felt like were either overprotective or maybe embarrassed about their disabilities, and sort of the range of maturities that we saw kind of the players coming into Camp Gen Ed, and how much the expectations that were put on them as young human beings shaped their outcomes as adults. And when we set low expectations for people, they always meet them. And for so long, that's what we've seen in the disability community. And we still struggle, is that we set incredibly low expectations because we don't want to put risk. We don't want people to fail. And so we expect nothing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think about, the educational system, just as a sidebar, I think about education in cities like Baltimore and so many others around the country, where we have, dismal graduation rates, where we have, too many teachers, not all, but too many that have those minimal expectations. They're not willing to go into the classroom and challenge these young people. And it shows in the end. It shows through that, that passing of them with I don't know, mediocrity, if you will, instilling that mediocrity into them. And what I saw, as I looked at the camp, and you're right, there were individuals there that were able to do a phenomenal job of caring for themselves as well as others. It was amazing to see the supportiveness that the folks with a disability still, they stepped outside of such and was willing to lend and to be supportive, whether it be helping an individual to the table to dine, to get dressed, to get into the swimming pool. Like, just amazing how, Julie, did you see him getting a freak on? Like
God.
I mean, like I said, you talk about high expectations. I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, just really to see them live. That's what I'm saying. Like, I went through a variety of different emotions, man. I was like, I'm all over the place in this thing. And it was just incredible to see how they came together, at Camp Gened, and it's spelled Jened. And the nickname for all of the campers were Genedians, which I thought was interesting, beautiful. And so just to see them take the camp and, use what they had experienced from the late 1960s to early 70s, to take that and to roll that into a movement, to roll that into a battle cry, to roll that into a initiative where they were going to fight for legislation and access. And quite frankly, Julie, I feel like they probably grabbed motivation, or let's say a steam, from the civil rights movement. Not that they weren't motivated prior to, because again, they're the one living and experiencing this. But if you come on the heels of, wait a minute, these folks just got legislation passed, while everything may not be, beautiful for them, they've done it. So let's get in the car while it's got some gasoline in it. And I really felt like it was a matter of timing. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways it was an ode to the original civil rights movement. And I loved the piece where they were doing the sit-in protest kind of thing, and the Black Panthers came and provided food every day.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a couple things that you just really hit on that are important. A lot of times we're too busy fighting each other for a space at the table.
Yep.
And for our own space at the table. And what was very deliberate and what was very pointed in the film is that, at least in this version of the civil rights movement, we supported each other and we knew that we were stronger together. We were different, right? And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging those differences. We would be losing out to not do that. But that by coming together, we would further the cause for all of us. And that's what the Black Panthers demonstrated. That's what the Genetians demonstrated by pulling all types of people with disabilities together instead of, saying, well, I just represent people who are deaf or people with polio or that kind of thing. They recognized that strength. And I think a little bit of that has been lost in our current fight for individuality and to be recognized. And that's something that we should talk more about, how to get that back. And the other thing that really stood out too, and you said this, you was like, people get their freak on, right? Right? I mean, one very big part of disability, especially when you have a visible disability, is being seen as asexual and unable to be loved or desired or to even have those desires as a part of who you are. And that's a way that we that the world dehumanizes people with disabilities and makes them less than or unable to kind of fully live a human life. And so what I really liked, while there was parts that, just make you uncomfortable as a parent when you think about your teenagers at camp, that really portrayed that piece of their humanity. And I think needs to be done more often because it changes the way that you look at a person in a wheelchair when you realize they have the same physical needs and desires and need for love and relationships that people with able bodies do.
Absolutely. I mean, again, when you paint more of the humanity piece on an individual, it absolutely changes how we see them. And you are so right. I think often to a comment Joe Madison made. He's on the same SiriusXM channel that I'm on. And I think about a comment that he made nearly a decade ago, and I had never thought about it this way. But what he was talking about, Julie, was people in poor communities. And I believe the conversation had something to do with stereotypes and, why do they have so many babies or this, that, and the third. And he said something that has stuck with me for over a decade now. And I'm paraphrasing, but what he said was, sometimes all you have is one another. When things are grim, paychecks are too short for the month, no food is in the refrigerator, and I can go on and on and on. Sometimes all you have is one another. And if one another results in your sitting on a couch and having a beverage and laughing with one another, if your one another suggests that you all are doing something different up to and including sex, and it results in a baby being born, sometimes that's the only smile some people have in life. And as I was watching that part of the Crip Camp, I kept thinking about that over and over again. Like, why don't these camp counselors buckle down on this? This because they say it, going behind the buildings and but in that same moment, I said, for them right now, it's just freedom. Like we are all like we are who we know we can be. And so we're going to be that person right now. And I believe that the people that led the camp they had to have that in their mind, like, let's let them live. Let's just let them be. They're not hurting anyone. Let's just let them be.
Yeah.
It was really,
And
really a moving, for me, it was a moving moment.
yeah, no, it was for me, and I was so happy to see it. And I think, what the other piece of it is that they took away the fragility that's often associated with people with disabilities. And one guy was kind of digging a hole to play a prank on the campers because they fall down a lot and they might fall and trip in this hole, right? They're not going to break. They're not going to break. And then when you say, okay, well, the chef's off today, so we're cooking for ourselves. What are we going to make? Well, oh, yeah, we all want veal parm, but veal's expensive, so we're going to have chicken.
That's right.
Those are just normal, everyday conversations that teenagers have, that people have, that when we take away all of the PC bullshit and we take away being afraid to break somebody or hurt their feelings and are just our genuine selves, it's that kind of engagement. And that's really, I think, that inclusion and that ability to, for the first time, see themselves in their peers, see themselves as independent, as capable, as a community, which really grew a lot when so many of them checked out to Berkeley in California. And that led to this revolution, the push for getting 504 not just signed, but enacted, and ultimately to the IDEA Act, which includes people with disabilities in education. I mean, if you think about Judy Heumann, who was one of the main camp counselors and is an amazing disability rights advocate, she had polio, and so she wasn't allowed to go to regular school. She had to go to special ed school.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm sorry, but she's smarter than me. She's smarter than you.
Yeah.
She's smarter than probably 3/4 of the people in the room. And they didn't want to educate her because she used 2 wheels instead of 2 legs. And without Camp Gen Ed, we may not have that kind of presence and that kind of leadership leading our community now, because they never had that experience that they deserve to have the same integrated education that the rest of us do.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible what they were able to accomplish. The grit in which they had to operate, the patience and the persistence in which they had to operate. You had presidents who didn't want to make the investment because they were asking questions around, what's going to be the return on investment, i.e., how many people are really going to use this? And almost as if it's not going to be enough people using it, then why would we make this investment on buildings, in cities, in transportation? You had hospitals, you had schools that didn't want to make the investment. So they really fought hard to just simply make a way for them to be able to be more present. And I think now, when we have people that need to have accommodations made in our workplaces, and I'm talking simple accommodations, because most buildings now have ramps and elevators, so that's not an issue. Yeah. I'm talking like a telephone. Just sometimes you need a special device. You may need a special desk. Just in organizations not willing to make those minor investments. I'm thinking now organizations where, once again, we said this a couple of weeks ago, how many of these organizations now, when they think about hiring talent, that talent being remote, will you put that opportunity in front of an audience that has been largely overlooked over the last 50 years? Like, will you advertise that opportunity? Will you connect and collaborate with organizations that service this community? Because we know that they can do the job that you have, that whatever that role is, from graphic design to data entry to accounting to whatever it is, are you willing to make that investment? And are you willing to make that investment today? That is what I want people thinking about post this pandemic? How do we include more people in the equations that we have about our business?
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is so many of the things that Judy Heumann said in front of California legislators, in front of the Capitol steps, are still being said today, and we still have a long way to go. Our civil rights journey is not as progressed as some of the other communities. And we need to be louder, and we need to be more forceful, and we need to be driving more independence for our community. And the main way that we're going to be able to do that is with employers who want to be a part of that movement, who want to understand that the value that someone brings to the table is not reflected in how they move, in how they think, in how they speak. It's so much larger than that. And if we slow down and take the time to see that value, then we can get so much more in return. And so watch it, and then watch it again, because it's that good. I hope it inspires you. I hope it lets you see my community in an entirely new way, and pushes you to think a little bit outside the box about how you can support us and our journey towards a greater inclusion and a greater part of the American dream.
So our name drop this week happens to go to an individual who unfortunately left us. We lost Chris Fields a couple of weeks ago, and I got to tell you, when the news came to me, about 10, 12 hours after they found out that he had passed away, I was absolutely speechless. He has been an incredible friend over the last 6-7 years, just an incredible spirit, supportive, funny, would post jokes and take stabs at, any and everybody. And my ask of all of our listeners, if you're not familiar with, Chris Fields, a way to, just pay a bit of digital respect, visit the blog site that he had created, performanceicreate.com. Again, the website is performanceicreate.com. He wanted all of the people that are writing or that were writing for that blog site to be defiantly different, to speak about our workplaces with an authentic and honest voice, not that sanitized and buttoned up and safe voice. Let's just call it like it is. And I know I wrote for maybe a year and a half, maybe a year and 14, 12, year and 2 months. And others were writing a bit longer than I was. But Chris Fields, you, my friend, you will most certainly be missed.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, really enjoyed being on Recruiting Brain Food this week. Look forward to seeing you on, having seen you on the special edition that was held on the 17th. And I'm going to be at home hanging out, trying to do some writing and all that over the next couple of weeks. You have anything else popping up, Torin?
Man, we got a lot of great stuff happening. We're still working behind the scenes. Like I said at the top of the show, I want to challenge each and every one of you to go to humanat.work, humanat.work, or actually it's humans@.work, and sign up for the virtual film festival that we're going to be doing on April 29th with Skill Scout. Again, the website is humans@.work, WORK. And of course, you can catch me on Sirius XM channel 126, 1 p.m. on Sundays. I don't know who my guest is, but I promise you, it's going to be another incredible conversation. And oh, by the way, follow Julie on Twitter @Julie Sowash. Follow me on Twitter @Torin Ellis. For now, Julie and I are Ghost.
See ya.